The December wind cut through Clara Whitford's wool coat like a butcher's blade as she guided her mare along the narrow mountain trail. 3 days of tending to miners' wounds and birthing babies in Deadwood had left her bone-tired. But the medical station 40 miles east needed her supplies and expertise. She'd made this journey dozens of times before, knew every rock and bend in the path. But something felt different today. The air tasted of iron and ice. Storm clouds gathered overhead like vultures, darker than any she'd seen this winter. Clara urged her mare faster, hoping to reach the shelter of Pine Ridge before the weather turned. The horse's breath came in white puffs, its hooves crunching through the thin layer of snow that had fallen overnight. "Just a few more miles, Buttercup," she murmured, patting the mare's neck. The animal had been her faithful companion for 3 years now, ever since she'd arrived in the Dakota Territory with nothing but her medical bag and a determination to help those the world had forgotten. The first snowflakes began to fall, fat and lazy at first, then smaller and meaner as the wind picked up. Within minutes, the trail ahead disappeared behind a curtain of white. Clara pulled her scarf higher, covering her nose and mouth, but the cold still burned her lungs with each breath. Buttercup whinnied nervously, her ears flicking back and forth. The mare had always had good instincts, better than most humans Clara had met. She leaned forward, trying to see through the swirling snow, when the ground beneath them suddenly gave way. The mare's front hooves slipped on ice hidden beneath fresh powder. Clara felt the world tilt sideways as Buttercup scrambled for purchase, her hindquarters sliding toward the edge of the trail where it dropped into a ravine. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs as she threw her weight forward, grabbing the reins with both hands. "Whoa, girl, easy!" But her words were swallowed by the howling wind. For a terrifying moment, they teetered on the edge. Clara could see nothing below but swirling darkness and the promise of a cold death. Buttercup's muscles bunched beneath her as the horse fought to regain her footing. With a desperate lunge, the mare managed to scramble back onto solid ground, but Clara could feel her trembling through the saddle. They stood there, both breathing hard. As the storm intensified around them, Clara's hands shook as she loosened her death grip on the reins. She'd been foolish to attempt this journey with a storm brewing. Pride and duty had clouded her judgment, and now they were trapped on a mountain trail with nowhere to shelter. Through the white chaos, a shape materialized, a rider on a massive black horse, moving with the sure-footed confidence of someone who belonged to these mountains. The figure was tall and broad-shouldered, wrapped in a heavy buffalo coat that made him look even more imposing. As he drew closer, Clara could make out weathered features beneath a wide-brimmed hat, skin darkened by sun and wind, and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He pulled up beside her, his horse standing steady despite the wind. When he spoke, his voice was rough as gravel, barely audible above the storm. "Trail's washed out ahead. You'll die if you keep going." Clara's spine stiffened. She'd dealt with plenty of men who thought a woman had no business traveling alone, medical bag or not. "I appreciate your concern, but I know these trails." A bitter smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Do you know Murphy's Creek swept away half the mountainside 2 days back? Do you know there's nothing between here and Pine Ridge but 40 feet of air?" The certainty in his voice made her stomach drop. She'd heard no news of washouts in Deadwood. But then again, news traveled slow in winter. If he was right. "There's an old trapper's cabin about a mile up the mountain," he continued, already turning his horse. "Built it myself 5 winters back. Solid walls, good chimney." He looked back at her, and she saw something in his dark eyes that wasn't quite kindness, but wasn't cruelty either. "Get in, or freeze." The words were delivered as fact, not invitation. Clara bristled at the command, but another gust of wind nearly knocked Buttercup sideways, and she knew her options had run out. Following a stranger into the wilderness went against every instinct, but freezing to death on a mountain trail would help no one. "Lead the way," she said through gritted teeth. He nodded once and urged his horse forward. Clara followed, keeping Buttercup close to the black horse's tail. The stranger moved with an economy of motion that spoke of years in the saddle, never looking back to see if she kept up. Somehow, That small show of confidence, or indifference, made her trust him a fraction more. The mile felt like 10. Snow pelted them from all directions, finding every gap in Clara's clothing. Her fingers went numb inside her gloves, and she could no longer feel her toes. Just when she thought she couldn't endure another moment, a dark shape loomed through the storm, a log cabin built into the mountainside, sturdy and low to the ground. The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion and pulled open a lean-to attached to the cabin's side. He led his horse in, then gestured for Clara to do the same. She practically fell from Buttercup's back, her legs stiff with cold. Together, they got both horses under shelter, though Clara noticed he did most of the work while she fumbled with numb fingers. "Inside," he ordered, pulling open the cabin's heavy door. Clara stumbled through, immediately hit by the blessed absence of wind. The cabin was a single room, perhaps 12 feet square, with a stone fireplace, a narrow bed, a rough table, and shelves lined with supplies. It smelled of wood smoke, leather, and something medicinal. Herbs, maybe? The stranger followed, closing the door firmly behind them. In the dim light filtering through one small window, she got her first good look at him. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 35 to her 28, with the kind of face that had seen too much too young. A scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, and his hands, as he pulled off his gloves, showed the calluses of hard work and harder living. "Ezekiel Carter," he said, moving to the fireplace. "Folks that knew me called me Zeke." "Clara Whitford," she replied, trying to stop her teeth from chattering. "I'm a nurse." He paused in laying kindling, glancing back at her. "The one from Deadwood. Heard about you." She wasn't sure if that was good or bad. Her reputation in these parts was mixed. Some appreciated her work. Others thought a woman had no business cutting into folks and birthing babies. Before she could respond, he had a fire crackling to life. "Strip off those wet things and wrap up in that," he said, pointing to a heavy blanket on the bed. "I'll make coffee." Clara hesitated. Propriety warred with survival, but her sodden clothes were already forming ice crystals. "Turn your back," she ordered. He did so without comment, busying himself with a battered coffee pot. Clara quickly shed her outer layers, hanging them on pegs near the fire, and wrapped the blanket around herself. It smelled of pine and smoke and something uniquely masculine that made her more aware of their isolation. "You can turn around," she said, settling on a three-legged stool near the fire. He handed her a tin cup of coffee so strong and black it could have stripped paint, but it was hot, and that was all that mattered. They sat in silence as the storm raged outside, the fire slowly warming the small space. "You weren't lying about the washout," Clara finally said. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was close. "Don't make a habit of lying," Zeke replied, "especially not about things that can kill you." She studied him over her cup. Everything about him spoke of solitude, the economy of words, the way he moved through the cabin without really looking at anything, the careful distance he maintained. "You live up here alone?" "Mostly. That's no way for a person to live." His smile was sharp as winter. "Says the woman who rides alone through blizzards. That's different. I have a purpose. People need me. Maybe solitude is my purpose." Clara wanted to argue, but something in his tone warned her off. Instead, she asked, "How long do these storms usually last?" "Could be hours, could be days." He refilled her coffee cup without being asked. "You're safe here, Miss Whitford. Whatever else you might think of me, I give you my word on that." The formal promise struck her as oddly old-fashioned, but sincere. "I believe you, Mr. Carter." "Zeke," he corrected. "If we're going to be trapped here together, might as well skip the formalities." Outside, the wind screamed like something alive and angry, but inside the little cabin, with fire warming her bones and strong coffee in her belly, Clara felt the first stirrings of something she hadn't expected. Curiosity about the scarred stranger who'd appeared like a ghost to save her from the storm. The fire crackled and popped, sending shadows dancing across the rough-hewn walls. Clara pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders, watching Zeke move about the cabin with practiced efficiency. He set a cast-iron pot on a hook over the flames, adding chunks of dried meat and what looked like wild onions from a string hanging near the window. "You don't have to cook for me," she said, though her stomach betrayed her with a low growl. "Got to eat regardless. Might as well make enough for two." He didn't look at her as he spoke, focused on his task. "Besides, you look like you haven't had a proper meal in days." She couldn't argue with that. The miners' camp had offered little beyond hardtack and beans, and she'd given most of her own rations to a family with young children. It was always like that. She couldn't help but give when she saw need. "Tell me about the washout," she said, needing to fill the silence. "When did it happen?" "Night before last. Heard it from my ridge. Sounded like the mountain breaking apart." He added something to the pot that made it smell like sage. "Went to check come morning. Trail's gone from Murphy's Creek clear through to Devil's Bend. You'd have ridden straight off a cliff." The casual way he delivered this information made her shiver despite the fire's warmth. "And you just happened to be out in this storm?" "Wasn't planning on it. Saw the clouds building, figured I'd check the lower trails for folks who might not know about the damage." He finally looked at her, his dark eyes unreadable. "Good thing, too." Clara studied him in the firelight. The scar on his face was old but deep, the kind that came from violence rather than accident. His hands, as they stirred the pot, showed other marks. A puckered burn on the left, what looked like a bullet wound on the right forearm. This was a man who'd seen battle. "You were in the war," she said. It wasn't a question. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "7th Cavalry. Till I wasn't." The 7th Cavalry. She knew their reputation. Indian fighters. Some called them heroes. Others had different words. She'd treated enough soldiers to know that whatever side they'd fought on, they all carried wounds that went deeper than skin. "I've tended plenty of soldiers," she said carefully. "Union and Confederate both. The hurt looks the same on every man." "That why you came out here? To tend the hurt?" "Partly." She accepted the bowl of stew he offered, the warmth seeping into her cold fingers. "Lost my fiancé to typhoid during the war. Figured if I couldn't save him, maybe I could save others." He settled on the floor near the fire, his own bowl balanced on his knee. "Sorry for your loss. It was a long time ago." The stew was better than she'd expected, rich and filling. "What about you? Why hide away up here?" "Not hiding, just choosing my own company. That's a lonely choice. Lonely's better than some alternatives." They ate in companionable silence for a while. The storm continued its assault on the cabin, but the sturdy walls didn't so much as creak. Clara found herself relaxing despite the strange circumstances. There was something calming about Zeke's presence. He moved with the quiet confidence of a man who knew exactly what he was capable of, good and bad. "I should thank you," she said eventually, "for saving my life." "No need. Would have done the same for anyone." "Somehow I doubt you venture out in blizzards for just anyone." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You always this stubborn about accepting help? Are you always this stubborn about accepting gratitude?" That got an actual chuckle from him. Rusty but genuine. "Fair point, Miss Clara." "Just Clara. You were right about the formalities." He nodded, then rose to add another log to the fire. As he did, his sleeve pulled back, revealing more scars. These were different, deliberate, ritualistic almost. She'd seen similar marks on some of the Lakota warriors who sometimes came to her for help, though they rarely trusted white healers. "You lived with them," she said softly. "The tribes?" He went very still, then slowly turned to face her. "What makes you say that?" "The way you move. For one, silent, always aware of your surroundings. The herbs in your stew, that's not settler cooking. And those marks," she gestured to his wrist, "those are Sundance scars, aren't they?" For a long moment, he just looked at her, and she wondered if she'd overstepped. Then he pulled his sleeve down and returned to his spot by the fire. 3 years, he said quietly. "After Little Bighorn, Couldn't stomach what we'd done, what we were ordered to do. Deserted. Should have been shot for it, but I made it to Lakota territory first. Man named Red Sky took me in, said any enemy of the Blue Coats was worth knowing. Clara held her breath. Desertion was a hanging offense, and harboring a deserter wasn't much better in the eyes of the law. But she'd seen too much senseless death to judge a man for choosing life over orders. They taught me to see the land different. He continued, not as something to conquer, but something to be part of. When the army came through again, Red Sky sent me away. Said I'd brought them enough trouble. Haven't seen hide nor hair of them since. You miss them? Every day. He met her eyes. That going to be a problem? Why would it be? I've treated Indians same as whites. Illness and injury don't care about the color of a person's skin. Not everyone sees it that way. Then they're fools. She set her empty bowl aside. I've seen what hatred does to people. Zeke, watched it tear this country apart. I won't be party to more of it. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You're an unusual woman. Clara Whitford. So I've been told, usually not as a compliment. Sss, maybe they're the fools. Then, the wind howled louder, rattling the cabin's single window. Zeke rose to check the door's barricade, making sure it was secure. As he moved, Clara noticed a slight hitch in his gait she hadn't seen before. Old wound, she asked. Took a Pawnee arrow to the hip, years back, before... He gestured vaguely. Red Sky's woman pulled it out, but it never healed quite right. May I look? I might be able to help. He gave her a skeptical look. In the middle of a blizzard. I have my medical bag. Buttercup wouldn't let me leave without it. She smiled. Consider it payment for the shelter and stew. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. Clara retrieved her bag from where he'd placed it near her drying clothes, grateful to find it mostly dry inside. She had him sit on the bed and roll up his trouser leg, maintaining professional detachment despite their isolated circumstances. The old wound was as she'd expected, healed but angry, with scar tissue that probably pulled with every step. She had some liniment that might help, and showed him stretching exercises that could ease the tightness. You're good at this, he said as she worked. I should hope so. Trained at one of the best hospitals in Philadelphia before coming west. What made you leave all that behind? She considered her answer as she wrapped his leg. Same as you, I suppose. Couldn't stomach what I saw there. Society folk who'd never dirty their hands but had no problem sending boys to die. Figured the frontier needed healing more than another city hospital. No regrets? None? You? Some, but not about leaving. She secured the bandage and stepped back. That should help. Keep it wrapped for a few days. Use the liniment twice, daily. Yes, ma'am, he said with mock solemnity, making her laugh. They talked easier after that, trading stories as the storm raged on. She told him about the mining camps, the babies born in tents, the men who'd lost fingers to frostbite and fortunes to drink. He spoke of the mountains, the hidden valleys where elk still ran thick, the springs that stayed warm even in deepest winter. As night deepened, Clara found herself fighting yawns. The warmth, the food, and the strange sense of safety had made her drowsy despite the wind's fury outside. Take the bed, Zeke said, already pulling a bedroll from a corner. I'll bunk by the fire. I couldn't. You could and you will. That's doctoring orders, since you seem to respond to those. His tone was gruff, but kind. Storm's not letting up tonight. Might as well rest while you can. Too tired to argue further. Clara retreated to the narrow bed. It was surprisingly comfortable, with a thick straw mattress and heavy quilts that smelled of cedar. As she drifted toward sleep, she watched Zeke tend the fire, his scarred hands gentle with the task. She'd started this day thinking only of reaching the next town, the next patient. Now she found herself sheltered by a man who'd chosen solitude over society, who'd crossed the lines that divided their world and lived to tell about it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The storm might break, or it might trap them longer. Either way, she realized with surprise, she wasn't entirely unhappy about the delay. The last thing she saw before sleep took her was Zeke's profile in the firelight, watchful and protective, standing guard against more than just the storm. Clara woke to silence. After hours of howling wind, the sudden quiet felt almost oppressive. Pale light filtered through the frost-covered window, casting the cabin in shades of silver and gray. The fire had burned low, just embers glowing in the hearth. Zeke was already up, standing by the window with a cup of coffee in his hand. He'd changed clothes, she noticed, trading yesterday's heavy coat for a worn leather vest over a dark shirt. In the morning light, she could see lines around his eyes that spoke of too many hours squinting into sun and snow. "Storm's past," he said without turning, but it left its mark. Clara rose, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders, and joined him at the window. The world outside had been transformed into something from a fairy tale, if fairy tales included the very real possibility of death. Snow covered everything in thick drifts, erasing familiar landmarks. Trees bent under the weight, their branches creating strange sculptures against the pristine white. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "Beautiful and deadly," Zeke corrected. "That snow's hiding ice underneath. Won't be safe to travel for at least a day, maybe 2. Clara's heart sank. Another day meant more patients going without care, more emergencies she wouldn't be there to handle. "There must be some way, unless you can fly. We're stuck." He turned from the window, studying her with those dark eyes. "I know it chafes, being helpless, but fighting nature's a fool's game." She wanted to argue, but knew he was right. Instead, she asked, "What about supplies? Food?" "Got enough to last a week if we're careful. Plenty of coffee, dried meat, preserves. Can always hunt if needed." He moved to the fire, adding wood to coax it back to life. "Question is, can you handle being still that long?" "I suppose I'll have to." She accepted the coffee he offered, wrapping her hands around the warm tin. "Might as well make myself useful. That leg needs checking. And I noticed you favoring your left shoulder yesterday." "It's nothing." "Let me be the judge of that. You saved my life. Least I can do is make sure you're in proper working order." He gave her a long look, then shrugged. "After breakfast. Man needs food before he lets a doctor start poking at him." They prepared the morning meal together, falling into an easy rhythm. Clara found herself enjoying the simple domesticity of it, slicing bread, heating beans, working alongside someone without need for constant chatter. It had been years since she'd shared such quiet companionship with anyone. After they'd eaten, she insisted on examining his shoulder. The joint was inflamed, probably from an old dislocation that hadn't healed properly. As she worked, massaging liniment into the damaged muscle, she became aware of their proximity. His skin was warm under her hands, marked by scars that each told a story of survival. "There," she said, stepping back perhaps more quickly than necessary. "That should help with the stiffness." "Already does." He rolled his shoulder experimentally. "You've got healing hands. Just training and practice." She busied herself repacking her medical bag, needing something to do with those suddenly awkward hands. "Tell me about this place. How long have you been living here?" "Built it 5 winters back. Like I said, needed somewhere the world couldn't find me." He pulled his shirt back on, and she tried not to notice the play of muscles across his back. "The Lakota showed me this valley. Sacred place. They said, good for healing." "Healing from what?" He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "You ever do something that went against everything you thought you stood for? Something that changed who you were down to your bones?" Clara thought of the field hospitals during the war, the choices she'd had to make about who to save and who to let die. "Yes, then you know some wounds don't show on the outside." He moved to the shelves, pulling down a wooden box. "Since we're trapped here, might as well do something useful. These snares need mending." She joined him at the table, watching as he worked with thin strips of raw hide. His fingers were deft despite their size, creating intricate knots with practiced ease. He showed her the technique, patient with her clumsy first attempts. "My fiancé, Thomas, he used to hunt rabbits," she said, surprising herself with the memory. Always said it was more about the waiting than the catching. Smart man. Most of life's about waiting for the right moment. Zeke's hands stilled. You don't talk about him much. Not much to say. We were young. Thought we had all the time in the world. Then the war came and time ran out. She focused on the snare, getting the tension just right. Sometimes I wonder what kind of life we'd have had. Probably stayed in Philadelphia, raised a family, lived ordinary lives. That what you wanted? Ordinary? Once upon a time. Now. She gestured around the cabin. Here I am, learning to make rabbit snares from a cavalry deserter in the middle of a blizzard. Thomas would have been scandalized. But you're not. No, she admitted. I'm not. They worked in silence for a while, the pile of mended snares growing between them. Outside, snow began falling again. Lighter than yesterday, but steady. The cabin felt like a ship adrift in a white sea, cut off from the rest of the world. I need to check on the horses, as Zeke announced eventually. Want to come? Clara bundled up in her now dry clothes, following him through a door she hadn't noticed before that led directly to the lean-to. The horses whickered in greeting, breath steaming in the cold air. Buttercup nuzzled Clara's shoulder, seeking treats. Sorry, girl. Nothing today. She stroked the mare's neck, checking her over for any injuries from yesterday's near fall. Apart from a small scrape on one hock, she seemed fine. Zeke tended his black stallion with the same quiet efficiency he brought to everything. The horse, Caesar, he called him, stood perfectly still as Zeke checked his hooves and brushed ice from his mane. He's beautiful. Clara said, How long have you had him? Found him 3 summers back, running wild with a Mustang herd. Took months to earn his trust. He patted the horse's flank. Worth every minute. He's saved my hide more times than I can count. Like yesterday? Like yesterday. He scattered fresh hay for both horses. Wouldn't have seen you through the storm without him. Caesar knows these mountains better than most men. They spent the afternoon in various tasks. Melting snow for water. Organizing supplies. Reinforcing the cabin's defenses against the wind. Clara found herself telling stories from the mining camps, making Zeke laugh with tales of grizzled prospectors who fainted at the sight of blood but would fight bears for a claim. In return, he shared memories of his time with the Lakota, hunting buffalo, learning to read weather signs, participating in ceremonies he was careful not to describe in too much detail. She understood his reticence. Some things were too sacred for casual conversation. As evening approached, they prepared dinner together. Zeke had trapped a rabbit that morning before she woke, and Clara contributed wild onions from her own supplies. The simple stew smelled like heaven in the small space. You miss it, she observed, watching him season the pot with the same herbs she'd noticed before. That life, every day, he admitted. But missing something doesn't mean you can go back to it. Some bridges burn permanent. What happened, if you don't mind my asking? He served the stew, taking his time before answering. Army came through looking for hostiles. Found Red Sky's camp. I tried to warn them, but... He shrugged, the gesture carrying weight. They knew I'd brought trouble. Red Sky. He looked at me before they left. Said I'd have to find my own path now. Haven't seen them since. I'm sorry. Not your fault. Not really anyone's fault, except maybe the whole damn system that says one kind of people got more right to live than another. He ate mechanically, lost in memory. That's why I stay up here. Can't be part of that world anymore. But you came down yesterday. For me. Wasn't about you being white or a woman or anything else. Was about a person needing help. He met her eyes. That's all that should matter, isn't it? Just people helping people. Yes, Clara said softly. That's all that should matter. After dinner, she found herself reluctant to retreat to separate corners of the cabin. The day had passed surprisingly quickly, filled with small tasks and easier conversation, when Zeke pulled out a battered deck of cards, suggesting a game. She readily agreed. They played poker for dried beans, Clara proving surprisingly adept at bluffing. Zeke accused her of using her doctor face to hide her tells, which made her laugh. Useful skill, keeping folks from knowing what you're thinking," she said, raising his bet. "Learned it watching my mother deal with my father's business associates. Smile pretty, think sharp, never let them see you sweat." Sounds like good advice for any situation. He called her bluff, then grinned when she laid down a full house, including this one. Where'd a proper Philadelphia lady learn to play poker like that? "Those mining camps get long in the evening. Man taught me in exchange for setting his broken leg." She scooped up her winnings, said it was only fair, since I'd cleaned him out of actual money paying for the treatment. "Remind me never to play you for real stakes." "Oh, I don't know. Depends what we're playing for." The words hung in the air between them, carrying more weight than she'd intended. Zeke's eyes darkened, and for a moment the cabin felt much smaller. Then he cleared his throat, gathering up the cards. "Getting late? Should probably turn in." Clara nodded, recognizing the retreat for what it was. They were walking a dangerous line. Two lonely people trapped by weather and circumstance. Best to keep things simple. Safe. But as she lay in bed listening to him bank the fire, she couldn't help wondering what it would be like to cross that line, to let herself want something more than the next patient, the next town, the next day of service to others. Outside, the snow continued to fall, sealing them away from the world and its rules. Tomorrow they'd have to face reality again. The thaw would come, the trails would clear, and she'd ride away to her duties. But tonight, with the fire crackling and Zeke's steady breathing filling the darkness, she allowed herself to imagine a different life, one where bridges didn't have to burn, where choosing happiness wasn't selfish, where a woman could love a man with scars and not be thought foolish for it. It was a dangerous thought, as dangerous as any blizzard. But like the storm outside, she couldn't seem to stop it from building. The sound of horses outside woke Clara from uneasy dreams. She sat up, heart racing. As boots stomped on the porch, Zeke was already moving, rifle in hand, positioning himself between the door and where she lay. "Easy in there," a rough voice called out. "We know you're holed up. Seen the smoke." Zeke's expression hardened. Through the window, Clara could make out 3 riders, maybe 4, even in the dim morning light. She could see they were armed. "State your business," Zeke called back, not lowering his weapon. "Business is staying alive." The voice replied with a harsh laugh. "This storm's got us turned around. Need shelter and supplies." "There's a town 40 miles east. 40 miles of buried trail. You mean, come on, friend, Christian charity and all that." Clara rose quietly, reaching for her medical bag. She'd treated enough violent men to recognize the type by voice alone. Desperate, dangerous, used to taking what they wanted. Zeke glanced at her, a silent warning in his eyes. "Can't help you," Zeke said firmly. "Move along." The silence stretched taut. Then came the distinctive click of multiple hammers being cocked. "Maybe you didn't hear right," the voice said, dropping all pretense of friendliness. "We're coming in, one way or another. You can open that door, or we can burn you out. Your choice." Clara's mind raced. The cabin was solid, but not bulletproof. And fire. She touched Zeke's arm, felt the tension coiled there like a spring. "Let me talk to them," she whispered. "No, I've dealt with men like this. Sometimes a woman's voice makes them worse." His jaw was tight. "Stay back." Outside, the men were growing impatient. Clara heard them muttering, caught words like "smoke them out" and "plenty of time." Her healer's instincts warred with survival. These men needed help, but they'd chosen violence as their currency. "1 minute to decide," the leader shouted. Zeke moved so fast Clara barely saw it. He yanked open the door, rifle raised, and fired a shot that sent snow spraying at the horses' feet. The animals reared, their riders cursing and fighting for control. "Next one won't be a warning," Zeke said, his voice carrying the flat certainty of a man who'd killed before and would again. "I know these mountains. You don't. Turn around now, and you might make it to shelter. Stay here, and the wolves will be picking your bones come spring." Clara peered around his shoulder, getting her first look at their unwanted visitors. 4 men, all right. dressed in a mishmash of mining clothes and city wear. Their leader was a big man with a scraggly beard and mean eyes. Behind him, she recognized the type: camp followers, claim jumpers, the kind who preyed on honest folk. "You're making a mistake, friend," the leader said. But Clara heard uncertainty creeping into his voice. "We're just looking for—" His eyes found Clara, and his expression changed. Well, what have we here? Lady, you being held against your will. Say the word and I'm exactly where I choose to be." Clara interrupted, stepping into view despite Zeke's attempt to block her. "And you're trespassing? I suggest you listen to Mr. Carter before someone gets hurt." "Mr. Carter, is it?" The leader's eyes narrowed, studying Zeke more carefully. "You look familiar. Carter, we met before?" "Doubt it." No, I'm good with faces, especially ones with scars like that." Recognition dawned in the man's eyes. "Boys, I think we found ourselves the deserter, the one with the bounty on his head." Clara's blood ran cold. Of course there would be a bounty. The army didn't forgive desertion, especially not from the 7th Cavalry. "Even if that's true," she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "You'd have to get him first, and I've seen Mr. Carter shoot. He doesn't miss. 4 against 1. Lady, I like those odds." 2, Clara corrected, pulling her father's old Colt from her bag. 4 against 2, and I'm a nurse. I know exactly where to shoot a man to make him wish he'd died quick. It was a bluff. She was a passable shot, but no gunfighter. Still, the men exchanged uncertain glances. Town gossip had a way of growing in the telling. And who knew what stories they'd heard about the lady doctor who rode alone through hostile territory? The moment stretched taut as a wire. Clara could feel Zeke beside her, wound tight and ready to explode into violence. The horses stamped nervously, sensing the tension. Then one of the men in back spoke up. "Jake, maybe we should—" "Shut up," Jake snarled. But Clara saw his resolve wavering. The snow was starting again. Fat flakes that would make tracking difficult. And Zeke's mention of wolves hadn't been idle. She'd heard them howling in the night. "Tell you what," Zeke said, never lowering his rifle. "There's a trapper's cache about 2 miles north, marked by a lightning-struck pine. Basic supplies, nothing fancy. Take what you need and move on." It was a lifeline, a way for Jake to retreat without losing face. Clara held her breath. "And if we come back? Then we'll settle this permanent." Jake stared at them for a long moment, calculating. Finally, he spat in the snow. "This ain't over, Carter. That bounty's enough to set a man up for life. Only if you live to collect it." With a sharp gesture, Jake wheeled his horse around. The others followed, but not without backward glances that promised trouble. Clara and Zeke stood in the doorway until the riders disappeared into the swirling snow. Only then did Zeke lower his rifle. His hands were steady, but Clara saw the toll in the tight line of his shoulders. She secured the door, then turned to face him. "How much?" she asked quietly. "The bounty." "Enough." He set the rifle aside, running a hand through his dark hair. "Should have told you. Now you're at risk too. I was at risk the moment they saw me here." She put her pistol away, hands only trembling slightly. "Will they really find that cache?" "It's there. Might buy us time. But Jake's right. This isn't over." He moved to the window, scanning the white landscape. "They'll be back, probably with more men. Then we leave. As soon as the weather breaks." "We?" He turned to her, something unreadable in his eyes. "Clara, you can ride out of here. Tell them I held you against your will. No one would blame you." "Except myself." She crossed to him, close enough to see the fear he was trying to hide, not for himself, but for her. "I meant what I said. I'm here by choice. You don't understand. If they take me, it won't be clean. Deserters don't get trials. And anyone helping a deserter, I understand perfectly." She met his gaze steadily. "I've made my choice. Zeke, question is, what do we do now?" He studied her for a long moment, and she saw him wrestling with arguments, protective instincts, the lone wolf habits of years. Finally, his shoulders dropped a fraction. Cash will keep them busy for maybe a day. Storm's supposed to break by tomorrow night. We could make it to the high passes, lose them in the canyon lands. And then we keep moving till we find somewhere they won't follow. He touched her arm, briefly, carefully. You sure about this? Your life down there, your work, will mean nothing if I'm the kind of person who abandons someone in need. She covered his hand with hers, felt him go still. I became a healer to save lives. Zeke, that includes yours. Something shifted in his expression. A wall coming down. You're a remarkable woman, Clara Whitford. And you're a good man, despite what the Army says. The Army's not always wrong. About this they are. She squeezed his hand, then stepped back, needing to focus on practical matters. What do we need to do? They spent the rest of the day preparing. Food was divided into travel packs, ammunition counted, clothes layered for hard riding. Zeke showed her mountain routes on a rough map he'd sketched, marking water sources and shelter spots. They worked with grim efficiency, both aware that their margin for error was slim. As night fell, they took turns keeping watch. Clara insisted on her shift despite Zeke's protests, bundled in blankets by the window with the rifle across her lap. The snow had stopped, leaving the world crystalline and sharp under emerging stars. She thought about the life she was leaving behind, the patients who needed her, the small reputation she'd built, the simple satisfaction of her work. But when she looked at Zeke, dozing fitfully by the fire, she knew she couldn't have chosen differently. Some things mattered more than safety or certainty. A wolf howled in the distance, answered by another. The sound should have frightened her, but instead she found it oddly comforting. The wolves were survivors, making their way in a harsh world through loyalty to the pack. Perhaps she and Zeke could do the same. Movement outside caught her eye. Just a deer, picking its way through the snow. But it reminded her how vulnerable they were, how easily Jake and his men could circle back. She gripped the rifle tighter, understanding now why Zeke had chosen isolation. In a world that branded men outlaws for conscience, solitude was the only protection. Can't sleep. Zeke's voice was soft behind her. Just thinking. He joined her at the window, close enough that she could feel his warmth. Second thoughts? No, just first thoughts about what comes next. Scared? Terrified, she admitted. But not of Jake or the cold or even dying. Scared of... She struggled to find the words. Of choosing wrong. He finished. Of giving up everything for something that might not last. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I won't lie to you. Clara, life with me won't be easy. Always moving, always looking over our shoulders. You deserve better. Maybe, but this is what I'm choosing. She turned to face him. Unless you'd rather I go. No. The word came quick and fierce. God help me. No, I should send you away, but I'm not that noble. Good. I'm not that obedient. That surprised a laugh from him. Rusty, but real. No, you're not. Thank God for that. They stood together watching the night, and Clara felt something settle in her chest. Come morning, they'd run. Jake would follow, and the Army, and all the forces that said a man couldn't choose conscience over duty. But for now, in this moment, they had each other in the vast silence of the mountains. It was enough. It had to be. The storm returned with vengeance as darkness fell. Worse than before. Wind screamed down from the peaks like a living thing, driving snow horizontal, battering the cabin walls with ice-hardened fists. The temperature plummeted until even the air inside seemed to crystallize. Clara huddled near the fire, wrapped in every blanket they could spare, but still the cold seeped through. Her teeth chattered uncontrollably, and her fingers had gone numb despite the gloves. Zeke fed the fire constantly, but the wind sucked heat up the chimney faster than the flames could generate it. This isn't natural, he muttered, peering out at the white fury beyond the window. Seen plenty of storms, but this... A tremendous crack split the air, followed by a crash that shook the cabin. Clara jumped, heart hammering. A tree coming down, Zeke explained, though his expression remained troubled. Old pine, from the sound of it. Must be brutal out there to take down something that's weathered 100 winters. They'd planned to leave at first light, but Clara could see that was impossible now. Nothing could survive in that maelstrom. Not man, not horse, not even the wolves had been foolish enough to venture out. Their tracks from earlier had been obliterated in minutes. Another gust hit the cabin like a battering ram. The door groaned, and snow began seeping through cracks they hadn't known existed. Zeke grabbed rags, stuffing them into gaps. But it was like trying to bail a sinking boat with a teacup. "Help me move the bed," he said urgently. "We need to block that wall." They shoved the heavy frame against the north wall where the wind hit hardest. Still the cold pressed in, relentless and searching. Clara's breath came in visible puffs despite the roaring fire. "Come here," Zeke said, pulling her toward the hearth. "We need to conserve heat." He arranged their bedrolls close to the fire, then wrapped them both in the heavy buffalo robe from his bed. Clara knew she should protest the intimacy, but survival trumped propriety. She pressed against his warmth, feeling his arms come around her. Solid and protective. "Just body heat," he said, though she heard the strain in his voice. "Nothing more. I know." But she was acutely aware of every point of contact. The steady beat of his heart against her back, the way his breath stirred her hair. The storm raged on, growing impossibly worse. The cabin creaked and groaned like a ship in heavy seas. At one point, part of the roof lifted with a shriek of protesting wood before slamming back down. "Will it hold?" Clara asked, hating how small her voice sounded. "Has so far." But Zeke's arms tightened around her, built her strong, but never tested against something like this. Time lost meaning in the darkness and chaos. Clara dozed fitfully, waking each time to find Zeke alert, standing guard against more than just the cold. Once she woke to find him adding precious wood to the fire, moving carefully to keep from disturbing her. "You should sleep," she murmured. Later, he settled back beside her, pulling the buffalo robe tight. "How are you feeling? Any numbness in your fingers or toes?" She flexed experimentally. "They're there, cold, but there." A violent shiver ran through her. "Is it getting worse?" "Temperature's dropping fast. Too fast." He rubbed her arms briskly, trying to generate warmth. "This kind of cold, it's dangerous. Clara, seen men freeze sitting upright, not even knowing they were dying." Cheerful thought. "Need you aware of the risk. If you start feeling sleepy, warm, comfortable, that's when it's got you. You fight, understand? You keep fighting. I'm a fighter." But even as she said it, a strange lassitude was creeping through her limbs. The cold didn't seem so bad suddenly, more like a soft blanket than a knife. "Clara!" Zeke's voice seemed to come from far away. "Clara, look at me!" She tried, but her eyelids were so heavy. When had she gotten so tired? And warm. She was definitely warmer now. Maybe she didn't need all these blankets. "No!" Zeke's hands were on her face, rough and urgent. "Don't you dare! Open your eyes! Clara, now!" The command in his voice cut through the fog. She forced her eyes open, saw fear stark on his face. "There you are." His relief was palpable. "Stay with me. We're going to talk, and you're going to stay awake." "About what?" The words came out slurred. "Anything. Everything." He pulled her closer, his hands moving constantly, rubbing her arms, her back, generating friction and heat. "Tell me about your worst patient." "Worst?" She tried to focus. "There was a miner. Got his hand caught in equipment. Mangled beyond." She trailed off, distracted by how nice it felt to rest her head on his shoulder. "Beyond what?" "Clara, finish the story." She struggled to remember. "Beyond saving. Had to take it off at the wrist. He screamed so loud. No ether, just whiskey and leather to bite." "Did he survive?" "Yes, came back a month later to thank me. Said I'd saved his life." She was shivering again. Violent tremors that shook her whole body. Good, shivering meant her body was still fighting. "That's my girl." Zeke murmured. "Keep fighting." They talked through the endless night, Zeke pulling stories from her whenever she started to drift. He told his own tales, of buffalo hunts with the Lakota, of cavalry charges he'd rather forget, of the first time he'd seen these mountains and known he'd found home. Sometime near dawn, Clara found herself telling him about Thomas. Not the sanitized version she usually shared, but the truth, how she'd been relieved when he'd enlisted, because she'd realized she didn't love him the way a wife should love a husband. How guilt had eaten at her when he died, wondering if her lack of feeling had somehow cosmically contributed to his fate. "You can't love someone into loving you back," Zeke said quietly. "And you can't blame yourself for being honest about your heart." "I wasn't honest. I let him believe." "You were young. We all make mistakes when we're young." His hand found hers under the blankets. "What matters is what we do with the life we've got left." The wind began to die as gray light filtered through the frost-covered window. The temperature was still brutal, but the worst seemed past. Clara realized she was lying practically on top of Zeke, their bodies pressed together from chest to knee, his arms locked around her like he'd physically hold her to life. "I should—" She started to pull away, but he held her fast. "Not yet. Still too cold." His voice was rough. "Just not yet." So she stayed, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing, the warm pulse at his throat. Somewhere in the night, things had shifted between them. The careful distance they'd maintained had been burned away by necessity and near death. "Thank you," she whispered, "for keeping me alive. Thank you for staying alive." His hand came up to brush frost from her hair. "Scared me, Clara, more than any battle, more than facing Jake and his boys, watching you slip away. I'm here." She lifted her head to meet his eyes. "I'm not going anywhere." Something passed between them, electric and inevitable. Clara saw him struggle with it, duty and desire warring in his expression. Then, with infinite care, he lowered his head and brushed his lips against hers. It was barely a kiss, just a promise of warmth in a frozen world, but Clara felt it through every nerve. When he pulled back, apology already forming on his lips, she stopped him with a finger to his mouth. "Don't," she said. "Don't apologize for being human, for letting me be human too." "Clara, we nearly died last night. Jake's still out there, the army's hunting you, and we might not survive the week." She traced the scar on his cheek, feeling him tremble. "I'm tired of living for tomorrow, Zeke, tired of being proper and careful and alone. You deserve better than a broken-down soldier with a price on his head. Maybe, but you're who I want." The admission hung between them, stark as the winter light. "If that makes me foolish, so be it." He caught her hand, pressed it flat against his chest where his heart beat fast and hard. Not foolish, brave. Braver than any cavalry charge. This time when he kissed her, there was nothing careful about it. Heat bloomed between them, chasing away the last of the cold. Clara had been kissed before, chased pecks from Thomas, a few fumbling attempts by would-be suitors, but nothing like this. This was hunger and hope and desperation all tangled together, two people choosing each other despite the odds. When they finally broke apart, breathing hard, the cabin felt different, warmer, yes, but also smaller, more charged with possibility and danger. "What happens now?" Clara asked. "Now we survive?" Zeke said simply. "The storm's breaking. Jake will come. We'll face whatever we have to face." He touched her cheek, gentle as snowfall. "But we'll face it together." "Together," she agreed, and sealed it with another kiss. Outside, the wind gave one last mournful howl before settling into silence. The storm had passed, but Clara knew the real tempest was just beginning. Jake, the army, society itself, all would stand against them. But wrapped in Zeke's arms, warm and alive and finally honest about what lived in her heart, Clara found she wasn't afraid. Let them come. She'd survived the killing cold and found something worth fighting for in the process. The morning sun broke through the clouds, setting the snow-covered world ablaze with light. A new day, a new chance, a new path forward. Clara Whitford, proper Philadelphia lady, was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who chose love over safety, truth over convention, someone who would never be cold again. The sun climbed higher, revealing a transformed landscape. Drifts reached halfway up the cabin walls, and familiar landmarks had vanished beneath the white blanket. But the sky was crystal clear, the kind of sharp blue that only came after fierce storms. Zeke saddled the horses while Clara packed their remaining supplies. They moved with urgent efficiency, both aware that Jake and his men could appear at any moment. The snow would slow everyone down, but it would also make tracking easier. "We'll head north through Devil's Canyon," Zeke explained, checking Caesar's girth one more time. "It's rough going, but Jake won't expect it. Most folks think it's impassable in winter." "Is it?" Clara asked, securing her medical bag to Buttercup's saddle. "Mostly, but I know a route." He helped her mount, his hands lingering at her waist. "Stay close. Some of those ledges are barely wide enough for one horse." They set out into the glittering morning, horses plunging through chest-deep snow. Clara pulled her scarf up against the cold, but after the previous night's brush with death, the temperature seemed almost mild. Behind them, the cabin grew smaller, a dark speck against the white expanse. "Will you miss it?" she asked. "Some, but it's just wood and stone." Zeke guided Caesar around a fallen tree. "Home's not a place, it's—" He stopped, color rising in his weathered cheeks. "It's what?" Clara prompted gently. "Nothing, just mountain talk." They rode in silence for a while, concentrating on the treacherous path. The snow had obscured holes and obstacles, making every step dangerous. More than once. Buttercup stumbled, and Clara's heart lodged in her throat until the mare found her footing. They were perhaps 2 hours from the cabin when Zeke suddenly held up his hand. Clara reined in, listening. At first, she heard nothing but wind and the creak of snow-laden branches. Then, voices, carried on the still air. "Jake," Zeke said grimly. "Sounds like he brought friends." They could see the riders now, dark specks moving up the valley they just left. 6, maybe 7 men, following their trail with dogged determination. "How far to the canyon?" Clara asked. 3 miles, but they'll catch us before then." Zeke studied the terrain with a soldier's eye. Unless... Without warning, he turned Caesar off the trail, plunging into the forest. Clara followed, ducking low branches heavy with snow. They wove between trees, Zeke choosing a path that would be harder to follow, using rocky outcroppings and frozen streams to break their trail. Behind them, shouts indicated their pursuers had spotted the detour. Clara risked a glance back, saw the men spreading out, trying to cut off escape routes. "There!" Zeke pointed to a narrow ravine ahead. "Through there!" The ravine was more cracked than passage, walls of stone rising sheer on either side. Snow had drifted deep here, and the horses struggled, lunging forward in desperate bounds. Clara could hear their pursuers gaining, voices echoing off the stone. They burst out of the ravine onto a ledge that took Clara's breath away. The mountain fell away in a sheer drop, hundreds of feet down to jagged rocks. The path, if it could be called that, was a narrow shelf of stone covered in ice. "We can't," Clara started. "We can—" "Trust Caesar. Trust me." Zeke was already moving, his black stallion picking his way along the ledge with impossible grace. "Don't look down." Clara's mouth went dry, but she urged Buttercup forward. The mare trembled, sensing the danger, but responded to Clara's steady pressure, step by careful step. They crept along the cliff face. Wind tugged at them, and loose stones clattered into the abyss. Halfway across, Buttercup's rear hoof slipped. For a heart-stopping moment, the mare scrambled for purchase, hindquarters swinging toward the drop. Clara threw her weight forward, talking low and steady, until Buttercup regained her balance. "That's my brave girl," Clara breathed, patting the mare's neck with a shaking hand. They reached the far side just as Jake's men arrived at the ravine. Clara heard cursing, argument. The ledge was too dangerous for a large group, especially men unfamiliar with the mountains. "They'll have to go around," Zeke said with grim satisfaction. Bought us time. But as they climbed higher into the mountains, it became clear their escape had come at a cost. The forced detour had taken them off Zeke's planned route. Worse, clouds were building again on the horizon, promising more snow. We need shelter, Zeke said, scanning the peaks. There's an old mine shaft somewhere near here, abandoned since the silver played out. They searched for an hour, precious time slipping away. Clara's relief when they finally found the mine entrance was short-lived. The shaft was shallow, more of a cave, really, but it would have to do. They led the horses inside just as the first snowflakes began to fall. They'll find us, Clara said, watching Zeke pile rocks to partially block the entrance. Maybe, but not in this weather. He built a small fire near the entrance, where smoke could escape. Jake's no fool. He'll wait out the storm same as us. They settled in to wait, sitting close together on their spread blankets. The mine was damp and cold, but after the morning's terror, Clara was grateful for any shelter. She leaned against Zeke's shoulder, feeling the tension in him. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I'm sorry for dragging you into this. You didn't drag me anywhere. I chose this, remember? Choosing and living with the choice are different things." He stared into the fire. "You could be safe in a warm bed right now, not hiding in a mine shaft with a wanted man." Clara was quiet for a moment, then said, "My mother used to tell me a story about my grandmother. She was supposed to marry a banker in Boston. Everything arranged, proper and safe. Instead, she ran off with a ship's captain, spent her life sailing to ports she'd only dreamed of. Was she happy? Gloriously. Used to say she'd rather have one day of real living than a lifetime of safety." Clara found his hand, laced their fingers together. "I used to think she was foolish. Now I understand." Zeke turned to look at her, firelight playing across his scarred features. "Clara," whatever he was going to say was lost as voices echoed from outside. Jake's men had found them faster than expected. Clara's heart sank as she recognized Jake's harsh laughter. "Carter, we know you're in there. Come on out. Make this easy." Zeke was already moving, checking his rifle, positioning himself between Clara and the entrance. "Stay back," he ordered. "Not a chance." Clara drew her pistol, hands steady despite her fear. "Listen, Carter," Jake called. "We're not unreasonable men. Give yourself up, and the lady goes free. No harm to her. You have my word. Your word's worth less than fool's gold." Zeke shot back. "Maybe. But what's the alternative? You can't hold out forever. We've got time, supplies, and numbers." Jake's voice turned sly. "Besides, that bounty's dead or alive. Makes no difference to us how we collect." Clara saw Zeke's jaw tighten. She knew what he was thinking, that surrendering might be the only way to save her. Before he could do something noble and stupid, she called out, "Mr. Jake, this is Clara Whitford. I have a proposition." "Clara, no," Zeke started. "I'm listening, miss." Jake replied, "I have money, not much, but some savings. There's also my medical supplies, including laudanum and other medicines that sell dear in mining camps." She took a breath. "It's yours, all of it, if you ride away." Laughter echoed off the stone. "Lady, the bounty on Carter's head is worth 10 times whatever you're carrying." "Then how about information?" Clara's mind raced. "I know where the army patrols are thin, where a smart man could move goods without interference. I've treated soldiers, heard them talk." There was silence outside. Clara pressed on. "Think about it. A one-time bounty, or ongoing profit from running supplies through military blind spots." She felt Zeke's hand on her arm. "Don't," he whispered. "Don't bargain with your honor for me." "I'm bargaining with information, not honor," she whispered back. "And only to buy time." More discussion outside, voices too low to make out. Then Jake again. "Interesting offer, miss, but I think we'll take Carter and your information both. Last chance, come out peaceful. Or we come in shooting." Zeke and Clara exchanged looks. They both knew the mineshaft was a death trap if Jake's men rushed them. But surrender meant certain death for Zeke and probable worse for her, despite Jake's promises. "Give us a minute," Clara called, her mind working furiously. She turned to Zeke, speaking fast and low. "The laudanum in my bag, if we could vaporize it somehow? Create confusion." His eyes lit with understanding. "Smoke screen. Might work." He glanced around the mine. There, old blasting materials. Miners sometimes left small charges. They worked quickly. Clara soaking cloth with laudanum while Zeke jury-rigged a small explosive using leftover black powder. It wouldn't be much, just smoke and noise. But in the confined space, it might be enough. "Time's up!" Jake shouted. "Now, Zeke whispered. He lit the makeshift charge and threw it toward the entrance. The explosion was modest but effective, filling the mine entrance with thick, acrid smoke. In the confusion, men shouting, horses whinnying, Zeke grabbed Clara's hand. "The horses!" she started. "No time! Run!" They plunged through the smoke, Zeke firing his rifle to keep Jake's men back. Clara caught a glimpse of shapes in the swirling chaos, heard bullets whine off stone. Then they were past, running through the falling snow. Behind them, curses and more gunfire. Clara's lungs burned as they scrambled up a rocky slope, using boulders for cover. A bullet sparked off stone inches from her head, and Zeke pulled her down behind a large rock. "Can't keep running," he panted. "Have to make a stand." Clara looked back through the snow. Jake's men were spreading out, trying to flank them. Their position was bad, exposed, with limited ammunition. But Zeke's face showed the calm determination of a man who'd made peace with his fate. "Whatever happens," he said, reloading his rifle, "I want you to know. Tell me after." Clara interrupted. "We're not done yet." She spotted movement to their left, raised her pistol and fired. A yelp indicated she'd at least winged someone. Zeke's rifle cracked, and another man dove for cover. "Good shooting," he said with a fierce grin. "Remind me never to make you angry." Despite everything, Clara laughed. Here they were, outnumbered and outgunned, likely to die in the next few minutes. And she felt more alive than she had in years. This was what her grandmother had meant. Better one day of real living than a lifetime of safety. The firefight intensified, bullets chipping stone all around them. Clara's ammunition ran low, and she knew Zeke's couldn't last much longer. Jake's men were patient, professional, tightening the noose. Then, through the wind and gunfire, came a sound that made everyone freeze, the deep, echoing crack of shifting snow above them. All eyes turned upward to where the mountainside, destabilized by explosions and gunfire, was beginning to move. "Avalanche!" someone screamed. "Run!" The mountain roared like a living beast as tons of snow broke loose above them. Clara watched in horror as the white wall descended, swallowing trees and rocks in its path. Jake's men scattered in all directions, their pursuit forgotten in the face of nature's fury. "This way!" Zeke grabbed her hand, pulling her not down but across the slope toward a cluster of massive boulders. They dove behind the largest rock just as the avalanche thundered past, the ground shaking beneath them. Snow and debris flew over their shelter, and for terrifying moments, Clara thought they'd be buried alive. Then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. Eerie silence settled over the mountain, broken only by the distant settling of snow. Clara lifted her head cautiously, ears ringing. Where Jake's men had been, she saw only disturbed snow and a few hats scattered on the surface. "Are they?" She couldn't finish the question. "Some maybe. Others probably ran clear." Zeke pulled her to her feet, scanning for danger. "We need to move. Avalanche will bring every man within 10 miles to investigate." They picked their way carefully across the unstable snow, heading higher into the mountains. Clara's legs shook with exhaustion and delayed fear. Behind them, she heard faint shouts. Some of Jake's men had survived after all. An hour of hard climbing brought them to a windswept ridge. Below, the world spread out in white folds and dark forest. Zeke pointed to smoke rising from a cluster of buildings in the distance. Martinsville, he said. Mining town. Rough place. But they don't ask questions if you pay in coin. We can't go there. Jake's men will expect us to keep running into the wilderness. Sometimes the best place to hide is in plain sight. He studied her face, lined with exhaustion and cold. You need rest, proper food, medical attention for those cuts. Clara touched her cheek, surprised to find blood. She hadn't even felt the graze from flying rock. What about you? They know your face. I've got ways to change that. He touched his beard. Clean-shaven, different clothes. I can pass for a dozen other drifters. They descended toward the town as afternoon shadows lengthened. On the outskirts, Zeke led them to a rundown stable where a gap-toothed old man took their arrival in stride. Need to board 2 horses, Zeke said, producing coins from his pocket. And forget you saw us. The man studied the silver, then nodded. Memory's been failing me lately anyway. They slipped into Martinsville as darkness fell. The town was typical of mining settlements, one muddy main street lined with saloons, supply stores, and establishments of negotiable virtue. Miners just off shift crowded the walkways, spending their hard-earned silver on whiskey and companionship. Zeke led Clara to a boarding house that had seen better days. The proprietress, a stern woman named Mrs. Hazelton, looked them over with sharp eyes. Married? She demanded. Yes, ma'am. Zeke lied smoothly. Week ago in Denver. Papers got lost in the storm. Mrs. Hazelton's expression said she didn't believe a word, but appreciated the effort at propriety. Rooms $2 a night, paid in advance. No visitors, no drinking, no loud noise. Yes, ma'am, Clara said, leaning into her role. We're just grateful for a clean bed. Their room was small, but clean, with a narrow bed and a washstand. Clara sank onto the mattress, suddenly aware of every ache and pain. Zeke bolted the door, then went to the window, checking sight lines and escape routes. Rest, he ordered. I'll keep watch. You need rest too. Clara patted the bed beside her. We're supposed to be married, remember? Mrs. Hazelton strikes me as the type to check. He hesitated, then sat on the bed's edge, careful to maintain distance. Clara, about what I started to say earlier. I know. She touched his hand. But we're alive. Zeke, against all odds. We're alive and free. Let that be enough for tonight. A knock at the door made them both freeze. Hot water. Mrs. Hazelton's voice called. Thought you might want to wash up. Zeke opened the door cautiously. The landlady entered with a steaming pitcher and clean towels, her eyes taking in their torn clothes and Clara's scraped face. Rough journey? She asked. Storm caught us in the passes. Clara said truthfully. Mrs. Hazelton set down the water. There's a doctor 3 doors down, if you need tending, and the mercantile opens at 7 if you need supplies. She paused at the door. Whatever trouble you're running from, it's none of my business, but Jake Morrison and his boys drink at the Silver Dollar. Might want to avoid that establishment. After she left, Clara and Zeke exchanged glances. She knows, Clara said. She knows something. Question is whether she'll sell that knowledge. Zeke poured water into the basin. Here, let me clean those cuts. His hands were gentle as he tended her injuries, washing away blood and dirt with careful strokes. Clara closed her eyes, allowing herself this moment of tenderness after the day's violence. Your turn, she said when he finished, taking the cloth from him. A bullet had grazed his temple, leaving a furrow in his scalp. She cleaned it carefully, noting other injuries, bruised ribs, a deep cut on his hand. We make quite a pair, she murmured. Beaten but not broken. He caught her hand. Clara, we need to talk about what happens next. This isn't over. Jake lost men in that avalanche. He'll want blood now, not just bounty. Then we keep running. For how long? This is no life for you. It's the life I'm choosing. She met his eyes steadily. Unless you're trying to get rid of me. Never. The word came fierce and immediate. But I need you to understand what you're sacrificing. Your work, Your calling, my calling is to heal people and save lives. I saved yours, didn't I? She managed a tired smile. Besides, plenty of folks need doctoring in towns like this, maybe more than in proper settlements. You'd do that? Practice medicine in mining camps and border towns? Why not? They hurt and bleed same as anyone. She yawned, exhaustion catching up. Can we plan our future tomorrow? Tonight. I just want to pretend we're what we told Mrs. Hazelton, newlyweds starting a life together. Zeke's expression softened. All right. Tomorrow we plan. He stood, pulling off his boots. You take the bed. You'll share the bed like a proper husband. Clara interrupted. We're both exhausted. It's cold, and Mrs. Hazelton has ears like a bat. Please, Zeke, just hold me after today. I need to feel safe. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. They lay down fully clothed, Zeke's arms coming around her with careful respect. Clara pressed back against his warmth, feeling the rapid beat of his heart. Thank you, she whispered, for keeping us alive. Thank you for making it worth surviving. Exhaustion pulled her toward sleep, but Clara fought it for a moment longer. Outside, she could hear the rough sounds of Martinsville's nightlife. Breaking glass, drunken laughter, a woman's sharp voice demanding payment. It wasn't the life she'd planned, so far from Philadelphia's orderly streets and proper society. But Zeke's arms were around her, his breath warm on her neck, his presence a shield against the world's dangers. She thought of her grandmother sailing into unknown ports, choosing adventure over safety. Had she felt this same mix of terror and exhilaration? Zeke, she whispered. Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know, I don't regret any of it, not one moment. His arms tightened. Neither do I. Sleep took her then, deep and dreamless, but even in unconsciousness, some part of her remained alert, ready to run or fight at need. This was her life now, always on edge, always ready, but never alone. In the morning, they'd face whatever came next. Jake Morrison might find them, or the army, or any of a dozen other dangers. They'd have to be clever, careful, constantly moving. It would be hard, dangerous, uncertain. But tonight, in a shabby boarding house room in a town that didn't exist on most maps, Clara Whitford felt more at home than she ever had in her proper Eastern life. Because home, as Zeke had almost said before, wasn't a place. It was a person, and she'd found hers. The sounds of Martinsville gradually faded as the town settled into uneasy sleep. In their narrow bed, two fugitives held each other against the cold and uncertainty, finding warmth not just in shared body heat but in the knowledge that whatever tomorrow brought, they'd face it together. Outside their window, snow began to fall again, covering their tracks and buying them time, but Clara didn't see it. Safe in Zeke's arms, she slept the sleep of someone who'd finally stopped running from life and started running toward it instead. Dawn painted the mountains crimson and gold as Clara and Zeke prepared to leave Martinsville. They'd risen before first light, gathering supplies from the mercantile as soon as it opened. Zeke had transformed himself, clean-shaven, wearing a merchant's coat instead of trail clothes, his distinctive scar hidden beneath a hat's shadow. Ready? He asked, helping Clara onto a sturdy mare they'd purchased to replace their lost horses. As I'll ever be. She adjusted her own disguise, hair pinned differently, a plain dress instead of her practical riding clothes. They looked like what they claimed to be, a respectable couple heading west. They rode out as the town stirred to life, miners trudging toward their shifts. But at the edge of town, a familiar figure stepped into their path. Jake Morrison, battered but very much alive, flanked by two remaining men. Going somewhere, Carter? Jake's face was a map of cuts and bruises from the avalanche. Or should I say, Mr. and Mrs., whoever you're pretending to be. Zeke's hand moved toward his rifle, but Jake raised a hand. Hold on now, before anyone does anything foolish. Hear me out. Oh, nothing you say interests me. Zeke growled. Not even that Marshal Hendricks rode into town an hour ago? Jake's smile was cold. Looking for a deserter and the woman fool enough to help him? Seems the army's upped the bounty. Dead or alive. Like I said. Clara's heart sank. A U.S. Marshal meant official law. Not just bounty hunters. Their crimes were federal now. Here's what I'm thinking, Jake continued. That avalanche cost me 3 good men. Men with families. You owe me blood. Carter, but... He looked at Clara. The lady proved she's got steel, and I heard what she did for Tom Garrett's boy last night. Clara started. She had treated a child at the boarding house, a miner's son with fever. Word traveled fast in small towns. So, here's my offer. Jake said, you two disappear. Really disappear. Head for Mexico, Canada, somewhere the law won't follow. And I tell the marshal I saw you die in that avalanche. Why would you do that? Zeke asked suspiciously. Because I'm tired. Jake admitted. Tired of chasing ghosts through mountains? Tired of losing men to grudges and gold? He spat in the dust. That bounty won't bring my boys back, but knowing you're gone, really gone, that might let me sleep. Clara saw the truth in his weathered face. The frontier aged men fast, and Jake had the look of someone who'd seen too much death. What's to stop you from collecting the bounty and killing us anyway? She asked. My word. Jake's jaw tightened. Which maybe isn't worth much to you, but it's all I've got left. That and knowing the lady saved Tom's boy when she could have let him die. Zeke and Clara exchanged glances. It could be a trap. But something in Jake's manner suggested sincerity. The code of the West was complex. Today's enemy could be tomorrow's ally, and debts of honor transcended law. Mexico, Zeke said finally. We head south. You never see us again. Done. Jake stepped aside. Marshal's at the hotel. Probably be there another hour. I'd ride fast if I were you. They didn't need second urging. As they spurred their horses south, Clara looked back to see Jake watching them go. A man caught between worlds just as they were. The day passed in hard riding, following trails Zeke knew from his wandering years. They stopped only to water the horses and gulp down cold biscuits. By afternoon, they'd put 20 miles between them and Martinsville. As the sun began its descent, Zeke led them off the main trail to a grove of cottonwoods beside a stream. We'll camp here tonight. Too dangerous to ride in the dark. They tended the horses in companionable silence, then built a small fire. Clara heated beans and coffee while Zeke kept watch, old habits dying hard. Do you think Jake was honest? She asked. Maybe. Men like Jake. They live by their own code. If he gave his word, he'll likely keep it. Zeke accepted the coffee gratefully. But we can't count on it. Need to keep moving. Stay ahead of the law. To Mexico. Eventually, though, he hesitated. There's something else. Remember I mentioned Red Sky? The Lakota who took me in. Clara nodded. Last I heard, what's left of his band was heading for the grandmother's land, Canada. Government can't touch them there. He stared into the fire. I've been thinking, maybe we could find them. You could use your healing skills. I could... He trailed off. You could find peace. Clara finished softly. With people who understand you. It's a hard life. Harder than mining towns. No guarantees they'd even accept us. But it's a life with purpose. Clara moved closer to him. I've been thinking too, Zeke, about what matters. It's not comfort or safety, or what society says is proper. It's being useful, being with people who need what we can give. You'd do that? Live among the Lakota? I'd live anywhere with you. The simple truth of it hung between them. But yes, I think I'd like that life, using my skills to help people who've been pushed aside, forgotten. It feels right. Zeke pulled her close, pressing his lips to her hair. How did I find you? Clara Whitford. You saved me from freezing, remember? She smiled against his chest. Get in or freeze, best order anyone ever gave me. They held each other as stars emerged overhead. Brilliant in the clear mountain air. Tomorrow would bring more running, more danger. But for now, they had this, a fire, food, each other. I love you, Zeke said quietly. the words seeming to surprise him. Should have said it before, when bullets were flying, but I wanted to say it now, when it's just us and the stars. I love you too. Clara lifted her face for his kiss. Have since you bullied me into that cabin. Bullied? He laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. I saved your life, and I saved yours right back. We're even... They made love there under the cottonwoods, gentle and thorough, no longer rushed by storm or danger. Just two people choosing each other, again and again, despite all the reasons they shouldn't. Later, wrapped in blankets beside the dying fire, Clara thought about the journey that had brought her here, a week ago. She'd been a respectable nurse, traveling familiar paths, living a half-life of service and solitude. Now she was a fugitive, riding toward an uncertain future with a man the world called criminal, and she'd never been happier. Tell me about Red Sky, she said. What was he like? Zeke's voice came warm in the darkness, painting pictures of a proud people struggling to survive, of buffalo hunts and winter counts, of a way of life being systematically destroyed. Clara listened, understanding growing in her heart. This was where they belonged, not in towns that would judge them, but with people who understood what it meant to be outsiders. We'll find them, she said with certainty, and we'll help them however we can. Together, always together. As sleep claimed them, Clara thought she heard wolves howling in the distance, but the sound didn't frighten her anymore. Like her and Zeke, wolves were survivors, loyal to their pack, living on the margins of a world that feared what it didn't understand. The fire burned down to embers, and still they slept. Two people who'd found home in each other. Tomorrow they'd ride toward the grandmother's land, toward Red Sky's people, toward a life that made sense, even if the world said it shouldn't. But tonight, under stars that had watched 1,000 such stories, they simply held each other and dreamed of freedom. Not the freedom of safety or comfort, but the freedom to choose their own path, to love without apology, to live with purpose. The mountains stood silent witness to their promise, ancient and enduring. Somewhere, an owl called. Somewhere, Jake Morrison was telling a marshal about 2 bodies lost in an avalanche. Somewhere, Red Sky's people were making camp, probably wondering if they'd ever see the white man who'd lived as one of them. They'd see him again, and they'd meet the woman who'd chosen love over convention, who'd trade safety for meaning, together. Clara and Zeke would write a different story than the one society had planned for them. It wouldn't be easy, but as Clara had learned in that storm-besieged cabin, the best things never were. Sometimes you had to choose between freezing in the cold of a proper life or stepping into the warmth of something real, something dangerous, something true. She'd made her choice, and as she drifted off to sleep in Zeke's arms, listening to his steady heartbeat, she knew she'd make the same choice again tomorrow and every day after. Get in or freeze. She'd gotten in, and she'd never been warmer. The first light of dawn was touching the peaks when they woke, ready to ride toward their new life. Behind them lay everything they'd been. Ahead waited everything they could become. Clara took Zeke's hand as they mounted their horses. Ready? With you, always. They rode north as the sun climbed higher. 2 souls choosing freedom over fear, love over law, truth over comfort. The mountains watched them go, keeping their secrets, sheltering all who had the courage to live outside the lines. And somewhere in the distance, carried on the wind, came the faint sound of drums. Thank you all for listening to this tale from the Old West. If you enjoyed Clara and Zeke's story, I'd love to hear where you're tuning in from. Leave a comment below and let's connect across the miles, just like our lovers connected across that frontier. Don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more stories of courage, romance, and adventure from America's untamed past. Share your thoughts about Clara's choice. Would you have gotten in that cabin or frozen in the storm? Until next time, partners, keep your fires burning bright and your hearts open to adventure.